New York Giants general manager Joe Schoen has some big decisions to make in the coming week regarding this roster. What are they and what makes the most sense? All of that and more on today's Locked On Giants podcast, coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina, P-Train, your host. Happy Friday to everybody. We made it through another week. And this weekend, of course, is Giants, Jets, the Battle of the Big Apple. We've been talking about it all week. But on today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to kind of spin ahead a little bit. Because General Manager Joe Schoen, Head Coach Brian Daboll, they have some decisions they need to make coming up before the end of the month. Such as who to trade, for example, if they're going to make any trades at all, such as certain roster transactions, which we'll talk about, and how they move forward with this roster regarding who they have or who they plan to keep. So we're going to talk about all of that on today's program. I've got some salary cap updates for you, all the good stuff as always. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Let's jump into it. Okay, let's go. All right, first up, trades. The NFL trade deadline is October 31st, so it is coming up. Halloween on all dates, right? So as I record this, it's the 26th, so 5 days away. As you view it, it'll be 4 days away. So it's next Tuesday, 4 o'clock is the deadline. And the question I get, obviously is, what will the Giants do? Will they make a trade? Will they stand pat? Will they have a fire sale? Are they going to just, be modest? What do I think they're going to do? Folks, a lot of, people think that it's going to depend on what they do against the Jets this weekend. If they win the game, then maybe they keep everybody. If they don't, maybe they move on. Folks, I'm not so sure about that. And here's why I say that. I went and I looked up the Giants cap space on Over the Cap. New York has $1.394 million in cap space remaining. Okay? That's to get them through the rest of the season. And I'm telling you right now, it's not enough. Not by a long shot. So you almost kind of think that a trade has to happen. There's going to be at least one trade because they're going to need to open up some cap space. And if they can do like what they did a few years ago when they traded Damon Harrison to the Lions, and I think they got a 5th round pick in return for that, it's better than nothing. All right. So that being said, in looking at the most likely guy to be traded, and there are a few, but I'll mention who I think is the most likely guy to be traded. I think it could be defensive tackle Leonard Williams. All right. Leonard Williams has an $18 million base salary. So if you divide that by 17, it comes to $1.058 million per week. If they were to swing a trade and get the acquiring team to take the remaining part of his base salary off their books, they'd be looking at a $9.529 million cap savings. Now, right now, the only teams with that kind of space that can afford Williams straight up would be the Raiders, Titans, Cardinals, Bengals, Cleveland, and 49ers. So if the Giants were to move Leonard Williams, I think what they would have to do is they would have to split the difference in his salary. So in other words, they would have to take on, there would be 9 weeks left. So the Giants would have to take about half of whatever the savings would be, which is the 9.529 million. They would have to maybe take on half of that, which would lower their savings to about 4.5 and some change. All right, so that would also open up the possibility for other teams to maybe get in if they were interested in Williams. You would have the Chargers, Chicago, Indianapolis, Green Bay, Carolina, Minnesota, and Seattle. If you're the Giants, I mean, it's pretty clear, I think, that the Giants are probably not going to re-sign Leonard Williams. And wouldn't it be something, you think back a few years ago, the Giants acquired Williams from the Jets at the trade deadline. And wouldn't it be something if they end up moving him at the trade deadline? So it was kind of a similar situation where they split the Williams' salary. I think at the time he was on his option year of his rookie deal. They split that salary, excuse me, and then they basically got him for cheap. So that's something I think we need to keep an eye on moving forward. Will Leonard Williams be moved? And we'll talk a little later on in the program about the youth movement, but that's the guy that I would keep an eye on for potential trade. Okay, one other name I'll give you. And by the way, Saquon Barkley is not getting traded. I mean, Joe Shea would have to get a deal that would knock his socks off to move Saquon Barkley. And they've already told him that they're not moving him. But another guy, I know Adoree Jackson has been mentioned as a possibility. But a guy who keeps flying under the radar, and I don't think is getting mentioned enough as a potential trade target, Paris Campbell, wide receiver. He's healthy. He's a speedster. The Giants really don't have a use for him in this offense, because they're swinging over to the youth movement. Paris Campbell has $2 million in incentives. And if those incentives are not met, that comes back to the Giants in the form of a cap credit. If you could trade Paris Campbell for a day 3 pick to a receiver needing to a team needing a receiver, why wouldn't you? He doesn't have a long-term future with this team. And like I said, I'm not sure where he fits in. They never really defined a role for him. So I would guess, and look, Paris Campbell's been a great addition to the locker room. His teammates like him, but I would guess, if you were prioritizing what the Giants might do as far as trades, Paris Campbell would probably be maybe a little easier to move than, say, a Leonard Williams. Might an Adoree Jackson be on the block? Well, Adoree's got that neck injury going on. That could complicate things. But Adoree's another guy who is in the final year of his contract and who I don't think has a long-term future with this team. But because he's got that neck injury, might be a little hard for the Giants to move him. So the two guys I would say keep an eye on are Paris Campbell and Leonard Williams. If the Giants can move those two guys, they basically have guys that can step in for those two. It's not like, they would be missing a whole lot. So just something to keep an eye on there. And look, again, the Giants only have $1.394 million in cap space, which is the lowest amount in the league. It's not going to be enough to get them through the rest of the year. So they're going to have to make some kind of move to clear cap space, which is why I think there will be some kind of trade. What that trade is, we'll find out if the Giants do it, but I don't see any other way other than, restructuring contracts, which they've already done. They've restructured Daniel. I just don't know where else they can restructure at this point because I think they've tapped out. So that's something to keep an eye on. And of course, if the Giants do make a trade, we will have an emergency podcast if we need to cover all that for you. So, all right, coming up next, the Giants have a looming decision that they need to make that really nobody's talking about, but we really need to be talking about. And that's at quarterback. And no, it's not what you think. What is it? Stick around and I'll tell you. Hey, Giant fans, snap into NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. If you think the underdog Giants can beat the point spread for a third week in a row, then go for it. Or maybe you're feeling good about Saquon Barkley of the Giants and Breece Hall of the Jets combining for over 200 rushing yards this weekend. Hey, whatever you like, whatever you prefer, FanDuel lets you bet on it. So go ahead, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, P-Train. And just real quick, folks, there's not going to be Locked On Giants live this week. And I do apologize, but my schedule is such this week. It's kind of crazy. So I'm unfortunately not going to be able to do a live broadcast. I know it stinks. I like doing the live broadcasts with Tana and Dog, but we will look to resume them the following week. I promise you. We'll look to resume them. It's just one of those things that I can't kind of manipulate out of. So I hope you're not too disappointed with me. But anyway, for my blue community members, aka the formerly known as the subtexters, I'll have a couple videos for you this weekend. So if you're listening, get your questions in. You have the instructions on what to do. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the blue community, or, you know, as I call it, you know, this, or the subtext community, you can find information on how to try it out free for 14 days. That's in the show notes. So check that out if you are interested. We've got a nice little community growing, and I'm actually enjoying interacting one-on-one with everybody. So hopefully you'll consider joining us. All right. The Giants have a decision to make at quarterback. And no, folks, I'm not going there. I'm not talking about a quarterback controversy. I've covered that topic already. I've made my feelings known. Whether you agree or disagree, that's fine. But there's another angle to this story that nobody's really talking about, and we need to discuss. It's a what-if scenario, but again, it needs to be discussed. What if Daniel Jones, who, by the way, this week in practice has still not yet been cleared for contact. Now, we know head coach Brian Daboll has said that Daniel will be the starter when he comes back, therefore ending any potential controversy that might have existed. But what happens if he's not cleared for contact going into next week? Then what? Here's why I bring this up. The Giants, right now, I would say Daniel's probably not going to play against the Jets, which would mean the Giants would have to elevate Tommy DeVito a third time. And if you recall the rules of the practice squad, you can only elevate a guy 3 times without having to expose him to waivers. So if they have to elevate another quarterback or add another quarterback the following week when they play the Raiders, guess what? Now they have to probably sign somebody to the 53-man roster, which necessitates now making room on the 53-man roster, which is where, you know, the trade could potentially come in. You know, if they trade a player, now they have an opening and they could easily sign a quarterback if they need to without having to necessarily put Daniel Jones on IR if he is not clear. All right, so here's what the Giants are looking at from a cap perspective if they have to sign somebody. Obviously, the logical answer would be to bring up DeVito. All right, DeVito is a rookie, probably won't cost them much. Now, the Giants a couple weeks ago, they worked out Matt Barkley and Ian Book. Barkley is would be in his 7th year. His minimum base salary would be $1.165 million. So you would have to divide that by divide that by 17, and then multiply that figure by 9 to figure out what he would cost on the cap the rest of the way. Book is a 1-year veteran, so his minimum salary would be $870,000. So again, divide that by 17, and then multiply that figure by 9, and that's his salary the rest of the way. So the Giants, like I said, if Daniel Jones is not cleared for contact by next week, the Giants are going to have to add a quarterback. And that's why I'm just wondering if, they trade somebody, do they have a trade in the works that they're talking to somebody about, regardless, by the way, of what happens with this weekend's game against the Jets, win or lose. So if they're able to move somebody, then, like I said, they now have an opening that they can slide a guy on there, and they don't have to put Daniel Jones on IR, because a lot of you have said, well, why haven't they put Daniel Jones on IR at this point? If he's going to be missing his third game, what would have been another game? Daniel can still practice. He's limited, can't do anything with teamwork that would put him at risk for, contact, but he can still practice. So the decision was kind of made to not put him on IR right away, even though when he suffered that neck injury, I think a lot of us figured Daniel would miss multiple games, because neck injuries, as I've said before, I'm dealing with one myself. They can take a while to heal. So, the Giants are going to probably have to make a decision. Now, Daniel this week, when he spoke to the media, said that he was kind of a quote-unquote week-to-week thing, all right? Unlike any previous reports of him being day-to-day, which everybody kind of knew wasn't the case. So this week, I'm thinking no Daniel. He's going to be inactive again. It's going to be Tyrod Taylor. Next week, we'll have to see where he is at. I don't want to predict, because I don't know exactly what he's dealing with. I don't know how he is feeling. Everybody is different. Some of you have commented on previous podcasts in the comments section on YouTube that it looked like it was whiplash. And certainly it did look like that. But again, I don't want to diagnose anything, because apparently where Daniel's having the pain, based on what we know, is on the left side of his body. So whether that pain is traveling down his arm, creating numbness, is it a stinger or a burner, or whatever they call it? It could be. Is it a pinched nerve? I mean, who knows? Only the doctors and Daniel Jones know what exactly he has. But yeah, I think the Giants, if Jones isn't cleared by next week, they're going to have to do something at quarterback, because they cannot keep elevating. They could risk it, I suppose, if they wanted to maybe expose Tommy DeVito to waivers. But I just think that's really not a risk that they should take. I think at that point, just add a quarterback to the roster, especially if you trade somebody and you have an opening on your roster. Just add them. You could always cut them later on if you need to. But assuming, of course, you don't sign somebody off of somebody's practice squad, at which point you would have to keep them on your roster for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. But certainly they can look to add if they need to, if Daniel is not ready to go. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the youth movement and whether or not we will see it as soon as after this weekend's game. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking for a fun and different way to play fantasy football this season, you need to check out Prize Picks. Just pick 2 or more players, predict their stats, and then sit back and see how they perform. It takes less than 60 seconds to make an entry, and best of all, you can turn a few bucks into some nice cash with the right projections. Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app, known for its quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and wide selection of player and stat types. And they offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, when every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to give you even more value. So what are you waiting for? Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and that promo code is LockedOnNFL for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Hey, Giant fans. So between my work here on the Locked On Giants podcast, my writing over on Giants Country, and being on site at East Rutherford to bring you all the latest and greatest Giants coverage, I just don't have the time to get to the grocery store to make sure that my fridge is full. Luckily, I don't have to, thanks to DoorDash. With DoorDash, I get everything I want when I need it delivered straight to my door from my go-tos like BJ's and Wegmans. For years, I've also trusted DoorDash to deliver freshly made meals from my favorite restaurants, and they've never let me down. And now that they've added grocery delivery to their offering, it's been a game changer. DoorDash has thousands of grocery stores to choose from, so you're sure to find one that's in your neighborhood that's right for you. You'll get what you ordered or they'll make it right. And you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a no delivery fee on eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. Now for a limited time, you can get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 when you use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Terms apply. Again, that app is DoorDash. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Thank you so much for joining us, and a happy Friday again to everybody. Appreciate you making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And on this segment, the Giants, we've been talking about some of the decisions that General Manager Joe Schoen has to make. Brian Daboll is going to have to make some decisions as well. All right, so as we all know, the Giants face the Jets this weekend at MetLife Stadium. If the Giants lose to the Jets, they will fall to 2-6 on the year. Now, remember, last year's record, they were 9-7-1, and they were able to get into the playoffs with that record. For the Giants to basically, if they fall to 2-6, the odds of them matching last year's record go down significantly. I mean, it's possible that they could go on a run, but, you never want to say never, but let's be realistic. They've got a couple against the Eagles, who right now are the cream of the crop. One more against Dallas. So there are a couple of tough games left on the schedule. And it's conceivable that the Giants' record will end up worse than last year's. So that being said, if you're Brian Daboll, what do you do if you lose to the Jets? In terms of, do you stay the course and just say, look, we're going to keep on rolling as we've been rolling? Or do you say to yourself, okay, let's look at the future. Let's get some of these younger guys that we haven't seen a whole lot of into games and see what we got with them. I think we potentially see a mix. Okay, so some of the guys, we've seen Trey Hawkins, for example, who has taken 52% of the defensive snaps. You could potentially see him seeing even more snaps over Adoree Jackson, who, as I mentioned before, is dealing with a neck injury. If he's not in the future plans, why not get Hawkins in there more and play Adoree, once he's healthy, as a spot player? Some other guys who haven't really gotten a lot of snaps. Jalen Hyatt, whose snaps are increasing. He's at 49% for the year. That number's going to go up, obviously, because this young man is really, a talent that needs to be on the field. I had an article on him, by the way, over on Giants Country, if you want to check that out. Some guys who we haven't seen a whole lot of. Dane Belton, safety, has only played in 18% of the defensive snaps. Right? So if Xavier McKinney, for example, is not in your future plans, maybe you start working Belton in there. Or if you're gonna move on from Jason Pinnock after this year, again, maybe see what you got in Belton, who hasn't looked that bad when he's been in the lineup. DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley. Riley's played in 20% of the defensive snaps, Davidson 23%. If the Giants move on from Leonard Williams, via trade, obviously, you try and plug one of those guys in there. Or even if you don't move on from Leonard Williams, do you maybe look to up those guys' snaps? So there's going to be some decisions that this team is going to need to make. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, that they tank. I want to make that perfectly clear. I think you have to still compete, But that being said, You don't want to wait to see what you have. If you know that your season, your odds of making the playoffs are not that great, I mean, why not see what you have with these young guys? I mean, for all you know, maybe they're better than what you have been trotting out there all along. So again, it's a little different than suggesting that they flat out tank, because to suggest they flat out tank just means throw up the white flag and don't even try. And I think back to what Joe Shane said when he first came here. He said that we can build and compete at the same time. And I think this would be a good instance of that of them being able to build and compete with their young guys, see what they have so that come the off season, they know exactly what they have to get, both in terms of the draft and in free agency. Because, you're never going to learn about these guys if you just, have them sitting on the inactive list or if they're not getting on the field. So I do think that is a decision that, if the Giants should lose to the Jets, fall to that, 2-6 record, I could see that maybe starting to flip in that direction. Now, if the Giants beat the Jets, obviously, the flicker of hope is still alive that maybe they can get one a run. But still, I would, at that point, pick and choose where I might look to maybe evaluate further some of these younger guys. So I'm curious to see how Brian Dable handles that. But I do think we're going to start to see maybe some of these younger guys get integrated more into the mix, especially as they gain, confidence and experience with what they're doing. And whether it pays off, well, we'll just have to see. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me on today's episode of Locked On Giants. As always, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll be back on Monday with a review of the Giants-Jets game. Hopefully it'll be a happy review. And then, of course, to my Blue Crew, I will answer your questions on a video, which I'll drop probably on Saturday. And, the usual content that you've come to expect from the subtext communities, aka the Blue Crew, is what we're going to call it going forward. So check that out. And again, for those of you who want information on joining the Blue Crew, check it out in the show notes. It's all there for you. All right, everybody. I'm Patricia Traina. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Monday.